gonna treat me right?
12 gospel musicians, each one raised in the church, each one carrying something sacred in their voice, and each one hiding something that their congregations, their fans, and sometimes even their families never fully saw.
Am I to know it's really real? Oh,
We talk about rock stars and addiction. We talk about rappers and overdoses. But the gospel world, that one stays quiet. Today, that changes. This is the story of 12 voices that sang for something higher, while quietly being consumed by something darker. Number 12, Little Willie John.
Know how much I care when you put your arm.
Fever. That one word, that one song. If you know it, you already know part of this story.
Baby, hear every word I say.
Little Willie John was barely a teenager when he started commanding stages across the country. Born in Arkansas and raised in Detroit, he was the kind of singer who made grown people stop what they were doing.
Sun lights up the daytime.
By the time he was 18, King Records had him on wax, and Fever, his signature song recorded in 1956, went to number 1 on the R&B charts. The boy had something that defied his age, but here's what most people don't know.
Fever in the morning and fever.
Willie John was raised in the church. His mother, Lily, taught him gospel songs from the time he was small. He and his siblings formed a gospel quintet in Detroit in the late 1940s, singing their way through the circuit long before the secular world ever heard his name.
Listen to me, baby.
And then the secular world got hold of him, and with it came alcohol and drugs, and a temper that even his closest friends couldn't explain away. By 1963, his label had dropped him. By 1964, he was on the run in Seattle after a violent altercation. By 1966, he was inside Washington State Penitentiary. He was 28 years old. He should have had 20 more years of music ahead of him.
Fever. When you kiss me, fever.
On May 26, 1968, Little Willie John was found unresponsive in the prison hospital. His death certificate says heart attack.
When you call my name, 'cause I know you're gonna treat me right.
But people who knew him, people who watched the alcohol and the drugs and the hard living eat through him year by year, they'll tell you without hesitation what the real story was.
Fever when you hold me tight. Fever.
The substances didn't kill him with an overdose. They killed him slowly, 1 year at a time. He was 30 years old. James Brown, who spent the early part of his career opening for Willie John, released an entire tribute album that same year.
When you kiss me, fever when you.
That's how much this man meant to the people who knew him best. And yet, some of you had to look him up just now. That's the cost of a life consumed by addiction. You can be a legend to the legends and still be forgotten by everyone else. Some of y'all grew up hearing Fever at a family gathering or on the radio and never knew any of this. Now you do.
Hold me tight. Fever in the morning.
Number 11, Margie Hendrix. She was Ray Charles's voice, the one who answered him, the one who pushed him, the one who made Hit the Road Jack the song it became, and almost nobody knows her name.
Well, I guess if you said so.
Margie Hendrix grew up in Statesboro, Georgia, the daughter of Caddy and Renzi Hendrix. As a teenager, she played piano, sang, and directed the choir at her local church. That voice, raw, powerful, built for testimony, was forged in the pews before it ever saw a stage.
I never have to pack my things and go.
By 1958, she'd moved to New York and become the founding member and lead vocalist of the Raelettes, Ray Charles's backing group.
What you say?
Ray himself once said, Aretha, Gladys, Etta James, these gals are all bad, but on any given night, Margie will scare you to death. That's the level we're talking about.
Oh, woman, don't treat me so mean, so woman.
And then she fell in love with Ray, had his child, watched him stay married to someone else, started drinking to manage the heartbreak, then moved from alcohol to heroin. And once heroin found Margie Hendrix, it didn't let go.
I'll be back on my feet someday.
By 1964, Ray had fired her from the Raelettes following an argument in Europe. By the late 1960s, she had withdrawn from music entirely. She was broke, isolated, barely visible to the industry that had once feared her voice. Margie Hendrix died on July 14, 1973, in New York City. She was 38 years old. The official cause of death remains unknown. No autopsy was performed. Most sources say heroin. Others say complications of poverty. What's clear is this: a woman who sang in church as a girl, who helped build the sound of soul music, died in obscurity with almost nothing to show for it.
I then have to pack my things and go. Yeah.
Regina King, preparing to play her in the 2004 Ray Charles biopic, said, "There's very little written about Margie Hendrix, which is pretty amazing because she had one of the most unique voices ever in American music."
What you say?
Think about that. One of the most unique voices in American music, and she died broke and alone at 38.
Oh, woman, don't treat me so mean, so woman.
If you've ever given everything to someone who didn't give it back, you know exactly where this road ends. Real talk. Only 9% of you are subscribed. That hurts. We're spending hours digging through archives, fact-checking every detail, bringing these stories back to life. And if you're watching this far, you clearly care. So hit subscribe. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Now, to my subscribers, barely any of you have joined the membership. And honestly, that stings even more. You know the work we put in. You keep coming back. If these videos have ever made you feel something, if this music means something to you, join the membership. It's $1 coffee a month, and it's the only way we keep this going. Let's build this together. All right, back to it. Number 10, O.V. Wright.
8 men and 4 women.
You've heard his voice sampled. Ghostface Killah used it. The Wu-Tang Clan used it. The soul music world never forgot O.V. Wright, even when the mainstream world did.
It was 8 men and 4.
Born in Leno, Tennessee in 1939, Overton Vertus Wright was a church kid from the jump. By the time he was in high school, he was already the lead singer of the Sunset Travelers, a gospel group.
You guilty too.
He later fronted the Harmony Echoes. Gospel wasn't just background for O.V. Wright. It was his entire musical identity before anyone ever offered him a record deal.
I was alone, so lonely.
Then a songwriter named Roosevelt Jameson discovered him. And in 1964, at 24 years old, O.V. Wright's first secular recording, That's How Strong My Love Is, was released.
And blue. You know why? Because
Otis Redding covered it. The Rolling Stones covered it. That's how strong the writing was. He had a string of Deep South R&B hits throughout the late 1960s and into the 1970s.
and call true love a cry.
8 Men, 4 Women, Ace of Spades, A Nickel and a Nail, songs that still make older audiences in the South stop everything when they come on.
Roll down my cheek.
A voice that Willie Mitchell, The same producer behind Al Green believed in enough to sign him to High Records. But beneath the success, narcotics. By the mid-1970s, O.V. Wright was imprisoned on narcotics offenses. When he got out, the commercial momentum was gone. He kept recording. He had to. There was an addiction that was eating him alive, and a heart condition that was getting worse.
How could they be so blind?
On November 16, 1980, at Joe's Supper Club in Grand Bay, Alabama, O.V. Wright stepped on stage. His third heart attack hit him while he was performing. He was 41 years old. He died on the way to the hospital.
8 men and 4 women.
A drug problem his body could no longer accommodate. A gospel singer who gave everything to a secular world that eventually gave very little back.
It was 8 men and 4.
The O.V. Wright Band kept performing for 13 more years after his death. Just without O.V.
This is what killed me. Running tears.
Number 9, Bobby DeBarge. Like It, Time Will Reveal, Rhythm of the Night. That family made some of the most beautiful R&B of the 1980s. But before any of that, before the record deals and the Motown fame, they were a gospel family. Their mother, Ederline DeBarge, is a gospel singer, and in their home in Grand Rapids, Michigan, gospel wasn't a style choice. It was the language of the house. Bobby DeBarge was the oldest and one of the most gifted voices in that entire family. Before there was DeBarge, before there was Switch, the funk group Bobby founded, there was a gospel-raised boy trying to find his way in a world that moved fast. Bobby had everything: a voice, a name, a family with talent to spare. But heroin found him young. And heroin is patient. By the time the DeBarge family was at its commercial peak in the mid-1980s, Bobby's addiction was already years old. The drug had been quietly consuming him while his siblings were on Soul Train, while their songs played on every radio station in America. While everyone was watching the family, nobody was seeing what was happening to Bobby behind the scenes. In 1988, Bobby was convicted for drug trafficking and went to prison. And while he was inside, he received news that shattered everything. He had contracted HIV, the needles, the years of intravenous use. It had been working against him the entire time. Bobby DeBarge died on August 16, 1995. He was 38 years old. AIDS, brought on by years of heroin addiction. While his family sang about love and God, he died of a disease the gospel community didn't want to talk. His mother, Ederline, the gospel singer who raised him, was by his side. The cruelest part? Bobby later said in prison that he regretted every needle, every night, every moment he chose the drug over his calling. The faith was always there. The upbringing was always there. But addiction doesn't care where you come from. Number 8, Clyde McPhatter.
I'd like to know.
Before Jackie Wilson, before David Ruffin, before any of them, there was Clyde McPhatter, and almost nobody in a younger generation knows that.
Does she feel just what I feel, and how am I to know?
Born in Durham, North Carolina, in 1932, Clyde McPhatter was a minister's son. He started singing in his father's church choir at the age of 5.
Does she feel just what I feel, and how
At 14, he formed his own gospel group, the Mount Lebanon Singers, and in 1950, when Billy Ward and his Dominoes came looking for a lead tenor, they found him singing in a church choir in Harlem.
I'd like to know when she...
The Dominoes were the incubator for what became R&B and soul music. And the sound they made, that gospel-soaked, church-trained intensity applied to love songs, started with Clyde McPhatter's voice.
True to me.
By 1953, he formed the Drifters. By 1956, as a solo artist, he had a million-selling record. Jackie Wilson replaced him in the Dominoes. Ben E. King replaced him in the Drifters. Both men studied McPhatter's technique with reverence.
To know when we're kissing.
Smokey Robinson cited him as an influence. He literally built the framework that Motown later walked into. And then the alcohol. It started somewhere in the late 1950s.
Is this a game?
A career that never quite lived up to its first chapter. Record labels that wanted something newer. Audiences who had moved on. And Clyde McPhatter, the man who had arguably been the most important R&B vocalist of the decade, watching younger men collect the awards he'd earned. Here's what gets me about this.
To know it's really real. Oh, tell.
In a 1971 interview, 1 year before his death, a journalist asked him about his fans, and Clyde McPhatter said, "I have no fans."
Will I win? It's a lover's question.
He died in the Bronx on June 13, 1972. He was 39 years old. The cause, complications of heart, liver, and kidney disease, all brought on by years of alcohol abuse. 15 years later, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Does she feel just what I feel and how?
He died believing no one cared. The truth is, everyone who ever sang soul music learned from him, and that's a particular kind of heartbreak that doesn't go away easy.
Should I worry?
Number 7, Dee Dee Warwick.
Oh, baby.
You know Dionne Warwick. You know Sissy Houston. You probably know their cousin Whitney. But the full story of that gospel family has a chapter that almost never gets told, and it belongs to Dee Dee Warwick. Born in East Orange, New Jersey in 1942, Dee Dee grew up in one of the most gospel-saturated families in Black American music history. Her mother managed the Drinkard Singers. Her aunt Sissy sang in them. Dee Dee herself sang in the New Hope Baptist Church choir alongside her sister Dionne and their aunt Sissy. Those three women later formed their own gospel trio, the Gospelaires. It was a performance at the Apollo Theater with the Drinkard Singers that got Dee Dee and Dionne recruited as session singers. That was the moment that changed their careers.
My love is strong, you see, I know you.
And Dee Dee could sing. Don't let history overlook her. 2 Grammy nominations. She was the first artist to ever record You're No Good, the song that later went to number 1 for Linda Ronstadt.
Never get tired of me, oh baby.
She sang backup for Wilson Pickett, Aretha Franklin, Nina Simone. The woman had a resume that deserved far more recognition than she received. But quietly, for decades, heroin. Dee Dee's addiction ran in the shadows while Dionne and Whitney stood in the light. The Warwick Houston family was gospel royalty. There was an image. There was a legacy to protect. And so Dee Dee's struggle stayed out of the headlines. I want you to sit with that for a second. She watched her family shine at the absolute top of the music world. She sang gospel with them from childhood. She sang backup for some of the greatest artists who ever lived. And while all of that was happening, she was fighting alone.
Oh, baby.
By the early 2000s, her health was failing. Dionne placed her in a nursing home in Essex County, New Jersey. Dionne was at her bedside on October 18, 2008, when Dee Dee passed. She was 66 years old. Whitney Houston performed The Lord Is My Shepherd at her funeral. Number 6, Esther Phillips. She was 13 years old when she walked into the Barrel House Club in Watts, Los Angeles, and won an amateur talent contest. 13. They called her Little Esther. Before any of that, she was church. Esther Mae Washington, her birth name, grew up in Galveston, Texas, and then Watts. She sang in church. She played piano. Gospel wasn't something she performed. It was how she breathed. The morning after her death, a UPI obituary opened with the words, "Blues singer Esther Phillips, the gospel singer who turned to blues." By 1950, at 14, she was recording hits with the Johnny Otis Revue. Double Crossing Blues went to #1 on the R&B charts. A Child, a #1 record, and then Heroin found Little Esther. She was still a teenager when the addiction took hold. The road was brutal. The people around her weren't always the right ones. She battled for the next 30 years. Periodic hospital stays in Lexington, Kentucky. Rehab, relapse, rehab, relapse. A comeback in 1962 when Kenny Rogers, yes, Kenny Rogers, found her singing at a Houston club and helped her land a new record deal. Another comeback in the early 1970s with Creed Taylor's Kudu label, where she recorded Home Is Where the Hatred Is, Gil Scott-Heron's song about heroin addiction, and delivered it like it was her own autobiography. Because it was. Aretha Franklin won the Grammy that year Esther was nominated. Afterward, Aretha drove to her and handed her the award. Said she deserved it. Stay with that image for a moment. Esther Phillips died on August 7, 1984, at Euclid Harbor Medical Center in Carson, California. She was 48 years old. Liver and kidney failure, from decades of heroin addiction. She was initially buried in an unmarked pauper's grave in Compton. It took a fundraiser organized by Johnny Otis a year later to give her a proper headstone. The verse engraved on that marker, "In my Father's house are many mansions." She chose that verse, and I think she meant every word of it. Number 5, Frankie Lymon. In 1956, the most popular teenage boy in America was 13 years old, 13, singing "Why Do Fools Fall in Love" at the top of the R&B charts. And in his Harlem apartment building, singing gospel with his brothers, because that's what his parents, Howard and Jeanette Lymon, had given them. His parents sang together in a gospel group called the Harlemaires. Frankie and his brothers were the Harlemaire Juniors. That was the foundation, faith and harmony, and the sound of the church. And then at 13, "Why Do Fools Fall in Love" went to #1 on the R&B chart and #6 on the pop chart and reached #1 in the United Kingdom. The Jackson 5 would later cite him as a blueprint. The Beach Boys studied him, the Temptations borrowed from him. He was the first black teen pop idol in America. Full stop. But by the time Frankie Lymon was 15 years old, he was addicted to heroin. A woman twice his age introduced him to it. He later told Ebony magazine, 15 13 years old, his voice changed during puberty. The boy soprano became a deeper baritone. The hits stopped coming. The industry moved on. Frankie spent the next decade trying to get clean, relapsing, trying again. He enlisted in the Army in 1965, partly to avoid a jail sentence for heroin use. In early 1968, Frankie Lymon returned to New York. He had a new record deal, new management, a recording session scheduled for February 28th. Everything was in place for a comeback. On the morning of February 27th, the night before the session, he celebrated by using heroin for the first time in years. He was found on the bathroom floor of his grandmother's apartment in Harlem, a syringe by his side. He was 25 years old. If you've ever watched someone who had already beaten something reach back toward it at exactly the wrong moment, you know how deep that silence goes, and you never fully explain it to people who haven't seen it. Number 4, Dinah Washington.
What good is love?
When Quincy Jones tried to find words for her voice, he said it was like the pipes of life. The pipes of life. Not many voices in American music history earn that. Ruth Lee Jones was born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, in 1924. Her mother, Azalea, played piano at St. Luke's Baptist Church. From her earliest years, Ruth was in that church, singing, playing, learning the instrument and the tradition simultaneously. By her early teens, she had joined the Sally Martin Gospel Singers, one of the most important gospel organizations in Black America. She dropped out of high school to travel with them. Then she won a talent contest at the Regal Theater in Chicago. Lionel Hampton heard her. Ruth Jones became Dinah Washington.
Like the dust, ooh, that hides.
The queen of the blues, the queen of the jukeboxes, one of the most versatile and commanding vocalists of the 20th century. 27 top 10 R&B hits between 1949 and 1955. A Grammy in 1959 for What a Difference a Day Makes. A voice that Aretha Franklin, who recorded a full tribute album in her honor, acknowledged as one of her primary influences. Here's what history doesn't linger on.
Heaven only knows.
Dinah Washington had been taking prescription pills for decades. Diet pills, sleeping pills, amphetamines to get through long tours, barbiturates to come down on the other side. The music industry of the 1950s ran on this. Nobody talked about it because everybody was doing it.
The glow of a rose.
On the night of December 14th, 1963, Dinah was in Detroit with her 8th husband, football player Dick Night Train Lane. They went to sleep. He woke up and she was slumped over, unresponsive.
Too soon. You're old.
The autopsy found a lethal combination of secobarbital and amobarbital, prescription medications she had been using for years to manage her weight and her insomnia. An accidental overdose.
And if my life is...
She was 39 years old, 8 marriages, one of the greatest voices in American music, a gospel girl who poured herself into a secular world that handed her pills and looked the other way. And then one night, the pills finally said enough.
Like the dust, ooh, that hides.
Number 3, David Ruffin. The voice on My Girl, the voice on Ain't Too Proud to Beg, the voice on I Wish It Would Rain that makes people stop and stare at the wall for a moment because they don't know what else to do with what they're feeling. That voice had a whole life before it ever touched a Motown microphone. David Ruffin was born in Wynot, Mississippi in 1941. His father, Eli Ruffin, was a strict Baptist minister, the kind of man who believed music served God and nothing else. As a boy, David sang in gospel groups, including the Dixie Nightingales and others on the Southern gospel circuit. He spent his teenage years perfecting that controlled intensity that would later make him one of the most extraordinary R&B vocalists of his generation. By 16, he had moved to Detroit. By 1964, he was the lead singer of The Temptations. Those records are etched into a whole generation's memory. He didn't just sing those songs. He lived inside them in a way that made every single listener feel personally addressed. And then cocaine. Starting in the 1960s and deepening through the 1970s and 1980s into something that crack made worse in ways nobody was prepared for. Arrests, probation violations, rehab stints that didn't hold. The Temptations kept moving. David Ruffin kept falling. And here's where I need you to stay with me, because this part is important. On the night of May 31st, 1991, David Ruffin had just returned from a successful tour of England. He had money. The comeback was real. There was momentum. And he rode in a limousine to a crack house in West Philadelphia. He collapsed inside and was driven to the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. He arrived with no identification. The hospital tagged his body John Doe while they ran his fingerprints. He was pronounced dead an hour later from an adverse reaction to cocaine. He was 50 years old. And if you were in Detroit the morning of June 1st, 1991, you already know what that felt like. His funeral brought together nearly every major name in Motown's history, because David Ruffin's minister father raised a voice that the whole world needed. And the whole world stood there at that funeral wondering why they hadn't said so while he was alive. Number 2, Billy Preston. He was 10 years old when he backed gospel legend Mahalia Jackson on the piano. 10 years old. Before the Beatles, before the Rolling Stones, before Will It Go Round in Circles, and Nothing from Nothing, and Outer Space, before any of it, there was a 10-year-old boy at the keyboard serving Mahalia Jackson in the church. And it wasn't a performance, it was his calling. Billy Preston was born in Houston in 1946 and raised in Los Angeles. His musical life was gospel from day one. By 10, he was playing for Mahalia Jackson. By the early 1960s, he was playing for Reverend James Cleveland, the man who would later be called the King of Gospel.
Willie Weeks on the bass. Ollie Brown on drums.
Billy Preston didn't drift toward the church. The church was where he lived. And then a European tour with Little Richard in 1962 introduced him to a young band from Liverpool called the Beatles. You know the rest of that chapter. He became the only musician to share a credit with the Beatles on one of their records, Get Back, released as The Beatles with Billy Preston. He was on the roof for their final concert.
Jeff Beck and Max Middleton.
He played on Exile on Main Street with the Rolling Stones. He co-wrote You Are So Beautiful, the song Joe Cocker made immortal. He appeared on the very first episode of Saturday Night Live.
If they all want to be with me, you gotta
This man lived inside the history of popular music, and throughout all of it, cocaine, then alcohol, then the spiral. He was arrested in 1992 for cocaine possession and assault. 9 months in a drug rehabilitation center. Guilty plea to insurance fraud in 1998. Prison time. And through all of it, he kept returning to gospel music because the church never rejected him, even when everything else fell apart.
Let's go party, y'all. Listen, do you know how to party?
In late 2005, Billy Preston voluntarily entered a drug rehabilitation clinic in Malibu. While there, he suffered cardiac complications that left him in a coma. He never regained consciousness. He died on June 6, 2006, in Scottsdale, Arizona. Kidney failure, brought on by years of substance abuse. He was 59 years old. His funeral lasted almost 3 hours. Little Richard spoke. Joe Cocker sang. A gospel choir sang the entire time. Letters arrived from Paul McCartney, the Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton.
Party tonight. We're gonna have a good time. I've got a lot of good friends here with me.
The boy who played piano for Mahalia Jackson at age 10 went home surrounded by the sound he started with. And that part, at least, that part doesn't hurt quite the same way. Number 1, Whitney Houston.
We'll always
She sang her first church solo at age 11 at New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey. The song was Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah, and the congregation sat back and understood immediately that they were in the presence of something that does not come along often. Maybe once in a generation, maybe less. Whitney Houston was born into gospel royalty. Her mother, Sissy Houston, was a founding member of the Sweet Inspirations, one of the most respected gospel groups in America. Whitney's godmother was Darlene Love. Her honorary aunt was Aretha Franklin. She grew up in the church the way most children grow up in school. Every single week, non-negotiable, the word and the music and the community that both create, and the voice. The voice was so far beyond what most human beings can produce that the music world still reaches for inadequate words when it tries to describe it. 7 consecutive number 1 singles between 1985 and 1988. The Bodyguard soundtrack, one of the best-selling albums in history. I Will Always Love You, Greatest Love of All, I Wanna Dance with Somebody. She also produced The Preacher's Wife, and that gospel soundtrack became the best-selling gospel album ever released. And for years, she was secretly struggling with cocaine. The drug found her in the 1980s. The marriage to Bobby Brown brought it closer. There were rehab attempts, stretches of recovery that looked like they would hold. A version of herself that kept reaching back toward what the church had given her as a child. On February 11, 2012, Whitney Houston was found face down in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton in Beverly Hills. She had been dead for some time. Official cause, accidental drowning. Contributing factors, heart disease and cocaine use. She was 48 years old. 3 years later, her daughter Bobby Christina was found face down in a bathtub in nearly identical circumstances. She was 22. And here is what this entire list comes back to. Every single person we talked about today started in the church. They started with something real, something they believed in. And somehow, the distance between that beginning and where they ended up became too great to cross back.
We'll always love.
We don't have to let that be the only thing we remember. We never did.